Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Sarah Peternell. I'm the owner of Family Nutrition Services in Denver, Colorado. I'm also the creator of the 30-day online program called Nourished and Renewed with Hashimoto's. You can learn more about that program in the pinned comments below. Today I'm answering a big question, which is what's the big deal with vitamin D? Especially if I have Hashimoto's, what do I need to know about vitamin D? Well, I've done some extensive research on this, and you can read the full blog on my website at sarahpeternell.com. But today I'm going to give you some of the highlights as we get ready to go into cold and flu season, especially in this year of the coronavirus pandemic that's been going on for several months now. So luckily, there's a lot of research now that's been showing up after doctors are starting to recognize the value of vitamin D in supporting the body, the immune system, and of course, we'll talk also about the thyroid. So today, I really want to talk about the role that vitamin D plays in thyroid health. Okay, and also it's important to know that so many people are vitamin D deficient to begin with. So we do have this problem in our country, especially because of our latitude and because we maybe don't get outside as much as we should. And when we do, we're using a lot of sunscreen. So we're not enabling the UVA, UVB rays from the sun to interact with the melanocytes in our skin and produce the prohormone vitamin D that is really more like a hormone, but also is a fat-soluble vitamin and is very important to our overall health. So we have some issues in this country because we become quickly vitamin D deficient, mainly due to lifestyle measures. But then, of course, if you become sick early on during cold and flu season, say like October, you could wipe out your vitamin D stores just with one illness. And it's difficult, it takes time to replenish your vitamin D. So unless you are actively supplementing, you are probably vitamin D deficient as well. This is a test that your doctor, your primary care doctor, physician, can run for you in their office. It's just a standard blood lab for vitamin D. And you can ask for this. And if you even need to pay out of pocket, it's not very expensive. But again, it's a very important test. And in my opinion, as a board certified holistic nutritionist, this test is predictive and preventative of many of the diseases that we face. So let's talk a little bit more about the role vitamin D plays with the thyroid. So a few things, first of all, that it's really important to know, and I already mentioned this, but vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. And so fat-soluble vitamins are really abundant in a lot of the foods that we can eat, such as it's available in salmon. It's also found in mushrooms, but you'd have to eat a ton of these foods. Like 36 ounces of sockeye salmon per day isn't really on anybody's meal plan. And mushrooms are also another abundant source, but it's not really a good idea to eat them in the amount that you would need for a therapeutic dose. Fat-soluble vitamins are more easily absorbed when they are consumed with healthy fats like from plant-based sources such as olive oil, avocados, nuts, etc. And the two major functions of vitamin D for the body before we talk about the thyroid are that vitamin D really helps to maintain bone health. It regulates and it also kind of triggers release and absorption of two other important bone minerals, calcium and phosphorus. And then the second major function is strengthening the immune system, which I just mentioned, and we'll go into that more as we talk about the thyroid, and especially as we talk about the relationship with vitamin D and this upcoming cold and flu season. So, so one of the ways that the vitamin D can play a role in immune system support is that it actually activates white blood cells and also T cells, which are like the memory or killer cells of the immune system. And higher levels of vitamin D have been associated with, of course, decreased risk of infection, but also decreased inflammation. And there's research to back this up. We actually didn't previously maybe understand the role of vitamin D in inflammation, but more and more we're starting to see that vitamin D also has anti-inflammatory, very positive anti-inflammatory effects. Okay, so it's also called a prohormone. You heard me say prohormone vitamin D, and that's because it actually really helps with hormone balancing in the body. And you can find this information readily on various websites. I find it interesting because even the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control here in the US, have listed vitamin D as a hormone that has particular regulatory properties with adrenal hormones such as adrenaline and norepinephrine. And it also helps to support production of dopamine in the brain, which protects the brain, and also helps the brain with processing other feel-good hormones like serotonin. So vitamin D is highly mood regulating, and also you need adequate dietary factors in order for this prohormone, vitamin D, to work properly in the body. So dietary sources of healthy cholesterol, which would be like pasture-raised eggs, certain types of shellfish, animal products that are rich in cholesterol sources such as liver from, say, like a grass-fed beef. Also, certain cheeses and dairy products are a good source of dietary cholesterol that helps the body to work best with vitamin D. So you heard me say we get vitamin D from the sun. That's really the main way that we get it. It is a complicated process, and I'm not going to go into tons of detail with that, but just know that you need vitamin D3 to be synthesized in the skin, in certain layers of the epidermis that are able to produce this formula, this conversion, right, of what the sun's rays do when it interacts with our skin and then turns into vitamin D3 in the body. So it's why we often call vitamin D the sunshine vitamin, okay? So we get it from the sun. But we do, again, have a lot of different variables as to why we become vitamin D deficient, including the latitude where you live, what time of year it is, the degree of skin pigmentation, and also the amount of skin that you allow to be exposed and whether or not you use certain types of sunscreen. Okay, sorry about that. We had a little technical issue. All right, so if you have any of these lifestyle or environmental factors that prevent you from getting enough vitamin D, it probably means that you have a vitamin D deficiency, and low vitamin D is equated with poor thyroid function. So we know that there's a relationship between vitamin D and the thyroid, but researchers haven't yet found the direct way in which vitamin D supports how the thyroid works. But we know that one of the most major roles that the thyroid has is to produce thyroid hormones T3 and T4. And the thyroid is triggered to do this by other hormones, including those in the pituitary gland, which produces thyroid stimulating hormone, which is TSH. And when we are vitamin D deficient, we also see correlating low TSH levels. So thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, is low when there is a vitamin D deficiency. And we see this presentation many times clinically, and researchers are starting to better understand this, that we know that low vitamin D does not allow the thyroid to function as well as it should. So, of course, if the TSH is low, then levels of the T4 hormone, which is typically the storage or the inactive form of the hormone, and also the T3 or active free-flowing hormone for the thyroid will also be low. So the most important thing, I think, if you have Hashimoto's or if you have hypothyroidism or if you even have the autoimmune hyperthyroidism, Graves', it's important to have your vitamin D checked on a regular basis, because people who have thyroid conditions are up to 40% more likely to be deficient in vitamin D than a healthy person. And I already explained all of the reasons why people, even who are just, healthy and don't have a thyroid condition, may have a vitamin D deficiency. So vitamin D deficiency correlates also with the presence of anti-thyroid antibodies. So I have other videos you can watch about anti-thyroid antibodies. Check those out here on my channel. But these are the little proteins that attack the thyroid and can cause Graves' or Hashimoto's. And so it's interesting to see, again, vitamin D levels I mentioned at the beginning of this video are correlated with the levels of inflammation. So adequate or elevated levels of vitamin D in the body are also, related to those lower levels of inflammation. And also, if we know that adequate levels of vitamin D would mean adequate levels of TSH. Both of those things are very protective of the thyroid. So anybody who has Hashimoto's wants to reduce the risk of having any type of inflammation systemically, and especially circulating around or near the thyroid. Okay, so let's get into a little bit more of the details. Well, I think there are some pretty clear signs of vitamin D deficiency, but you know what? They cross over so much with many other conditions, including hypothyroidism, like fatigue is a big sign of vitamin D deficiency. But other things to keep an eye out for would be like bone pain, chronic back pain, muscle weakness, muscle pain, even muscle cramps, and mood changes like depression or kind of lethargy, apathy. Some other things to look out for would be poor wound healing and also hair loss. So these types of things, as you can see, are quite often considered when a person is being checked out for hypothyroidism. Excuse me, doing a lot of talking, making me thirsty. Okay, so there are other internal risk factors that may be correlated with low vitamin D levels: heart disease, diabetes, and other blood sugar disorders, risk of certain cancers, MS, which is another autoimmune, and other autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, etc. These are all also correlating with low vitamin D levels in the body. So again, it's a simple test. You can also order vitamin D tests on your own through True Health Labs, and there's a link to the True Health Labs direct order link, and it's pretty inexpensive. If you do this test, I highly recommend that you take the results with you to your next doctor's visit and discuss this with them. Is taking vitamin D something that makes sense for me, meaning you, especially if you have Hashimoto's? Because if your vitamin D levels are outside of the normal range, or even if they're in the very, very low normal range, I would suggest that you really discuss this with your doctor to go on a therapeutic dose and then be retested and then see if it makes a little bit of a comeback. Also, a lot of people, I see this in my clinical nutrition practice all the time, where people are already supplementing with vitamin D and they're not absorbing it very well. So there may be some other factors at play. There may be some reasons why you're having difficulties with absorbing fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamin D. You may have some degree of leaky gut. There may be some digestive and absorptive issues that are preventing this. And there are also genetic reasons why we don't potentially absorb vitamin D as well as we should. So that gets a little bit more complicated in terms of this picture, but what we do know is that we can at least start with getting tested, find out what your vitamin D level is, and then start supplementing if needed. Okay, so how much is that? Well, the recommended daily intake, the RDI, is lower than what we think is a valuable amount. And so most experts now agree, and a lot of this was established by the Vitamin D Council, and again, now is correlated even in a lot of the allopathic medical establishments, where we see that the level that seems to make the most sense for adults is 2,000 international units, or IUs, per day. So there are a number of different vitamin D3 supplements on the market that are 2,000 IUs, and these have been found to be a safe daily amount, including pregnant women. In fact, there are even some research studies that show that women who are pregnant and take 2,000 IUs daily of vitamin D have better pregnancy outcomes. So I think this is some really good research and information for us as well. Okay, so let's see. If you have Hashimoto's, you probably need to take vitamin D year-round. We already discussed that there are some lifestyle factors, and even with other healthy dietary principles, the vitamin D, in order to be adequate, of approximately 50 ng to ml. That's where I really like to see most people. And if it's less than 30 ng to ml, then you really want to start with kind of more of that enhanced dose, as well as maybe even some vitamin K2 to help with the absorption. So I was actually going to say that a minute ago when I was talking about reasons why you may not be absorbing. If you have low vitamin K2 levels, that could be another thing that's getting in the way of your absorption. So my preferred supplement is a 5,000 IU plus K, the addition of the K2. And Metagenics, one of my very favorite companies, they make this in a form of a very easy to swallow soft gel. And you can find the link for purchasing this if you wish in the pinned comments down below. So start again with a therapeutic dose if it is found that you are less than 30 ng per ml, and then retest in about 6 months, and then you could go down to the maintenance dose of 2000 IU. I really recommend working with a board certified holistic nutrition therapist, your family doctor, with a naturopathic doctor, with an advanced chiropractor, anybody who really has a good understanding of nutrients and the way that nutrition works with the body, and especially the ways in which vitamin D can support your health. I do want to point out that the best sources of vitamin D from a food standpoint, I mentioned a couple of them earlier, but I'm going to just kind of give you for a reference. Cod liver oil, which is really more of a supplement, but it is kind of a food-based supplement, can be up to 1,000 IUs per teaspoon. So cod liver oil can be an adequate source. Then, some of the highest levels would be like salmon. Wild salmon can be up to 600 IUs per 2 to 3 ounces. It depends on kind of what time of year it is and, the vitamin D levels within the fish. Mushrooms can have around 100 IUs of vitamin D2, actually, so this is like the less available. Some mushrooms have a little bit more than that. And tuna, mackerel, and also it looks like potentially some sources of other types of fattier fish can have around 200 IUs. So really, these are the best available natural sources of food. They don't quite touch upon those therapeutic levels that you need in order to elevate your vitamin D3 status, which is why supplementation is really just an easier option. But do keep in mind that the rule of thumb, if you're getting sun exposure at certain times of year, which best sun exposure is from May to October, I usually say 30% of your body exposed without sunscreen or sleeves or covering for about 30 minutes. That's all you need, and you can get up to 20,000 IUs in kind of like a loaded dose that your body can use because of the way that the UVA, UVB rays interact with those cells within your epidermis layer of the skin. So it kind of puts it into like a storage tank and saves it for later. So if you're not getting adequate sunshine, and especially depending on where you live, this could be really important. Keep in mind, a lot of fortified foods also have vitamin D added to it. But it's not really the best absorbable type of vitamin D, and it's not in a natural form, so it's enriched. We're talking about cereals and yogurts and infant formulas and fortified milks and cheeses and things that have vitamin D added to it. And there are some problems with fortified foods. It sounds like maybe this is a good idea to do this, but fortified foods kind of are messing around with Mother Nature. These nutrients weren't naturally there, and you just kind of put the nutrient in as part of the processing, and the body doesn't have some of the other needed cofactors or other absorption nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are needed to make that vitamin work. So don't always just maybe read the label and be like, oh, great, this bread is fortified with vitamin D. I don't need to take a supplement, because that may not really be the best way that your body knows how to utilize that nutrition. So I'm going to kind of skip over for just a second to give you some of the research on COVID-19. This year we're facing this new novel virus. We're looking to see if we can understand some of the underlying potential mechanisms by which it interferes with the body. There is research that was just released. It's on the open network for JAMA, JAMA. You can go there, jamanetwork.com. Early September, Association of Vitamin D Status with COVID-19 results. And there was a study of 489 people who had vitamin D levels measured in the year prior to being COVID-19 tested, and the relative risk of testing positive was nearly 2 times greater for people who had the likely vitamin D status confirmed. So that's pretty significant, statistically significant according to the researchers, meaning that these findings are showing a very strong support role of vitamin D in COVID-19 risk, and also then conversely taking vitamin D supplements as a potential prevention and or reduction of severity of symptoms or, co-infections or complications from the illness. So luckily, we're very lucky that a lot of this research is reaching the mainstream, and more as we wait for some of the other therapeutics or other measures that we can take on more of a national or global scale. We do know that some of the best preventative measures are supporting your immune system, drinking lots of water, getting daily movement, eating healthful organic foods, eating balanced macronutrients, getting excellent rest, and taking certain supportive supplements, and I would for sure say that vitamin D is one of those. So I hope this video, although it's been long, I apologize for that, has been informative and useful to you in your daily lives as someone who may be living with Hashimoto's. And thank you so much for watching my videos here on this YouTube channel. Thank you for liking and subscribing and sharing if you think this information can help someone else. And I am posting new videos every Tuesday and Friday. So thank you so much, and I'll be back soon with more information.